The Bible is full of heroes. There's no greater collection of heroes in any book that's ever been written than the collection of heroes that are in the Bible. Finding themselves in situations that were overwhelming. Many people seeing there's a problem here, but God's scanning the earth saying, but who will do something about it? Who is willing to give their life for something greater than themselves? And when I say give their life away, scripturally we understand that doesn't mean that you will literally become a martyr, but it could. Not in America today. But it does mean you will give your life in the manner that Jesus said, that if you want to find life, you've got to give your life. And what He means is you've got to deny yourself. You've got to make things bigger than you. It can't be about you first. It needs to be about you doing the bigger thing with your life. I think of guys like Noah. Noah is really the first one that pops to my mind, and I'm sure he probably would be the first one technically considered a hero in the Bible. God shows up and there's a mammoth scenario going on here. I mean, I think world cleansing is a pretty big job. And someone's got to be the Savior for the few and the faithful. And all it's going to take is building a really, really, really big boat. And all Noah would ask God probably is, first of all, what's a boat? And second of all, is there a blueprint? And third of all, you want this done by when? Noah facing public ridicule, carrying the tag of the village idiot for a lot of years. But in his heart, he understood God has a plan. God has a mission. God has a purpose. He got vision for what God saw. Someone needed to do it. And he said what Isaiah would say many generations later, here am I, send me. It's the cry of the hero's heart. Here am I, send me. There's all kinds of guys like David that would be so obvious to talk about. You've got this little boy, the youngest son of a family that's part of the smallest tribe. And you've got this army of Israel who has been quite successful, mind you. Now they're facing the Philistines, and they're not really that concerned about the Philistines. They're concerned about the Philistines' hero, Goliath. And I was reading the other day, because we talked about David last week, and I was reading a passage in there when, remember when David went to the priest, he was on the run from Saul, and he didn't have any weapons or anything. He went to this priest, and he said, man, have you got anything at all I can use for a weapon here? And he said, well, it just so happens I've been given trust to care for the sword of Goliath that you slay. And that became his weapon. I thought, boy, there's a sermon within itself that I'm not going to preach today. His weapon ends up being what he took from the giant that he slew. And there was such a story there that if you're willing to become a hero, the reward and the trickle-down effect is beyond what you could ever imagine. Even though in America, I'm not sure how we would define reward anymore. We've become a little too superficial with things like that. David, a small boy, he comes in quite courageous, and he says, who's this uncircumcised Philistine out there mocking us? You know, who is this guy? Who does he think he is? And at this point, Saul has been asking for volunteers. Who will become our national hero? Here's a real opportunity for somebody. We will be writing about you for generations to come. There will be skinny, tall preachers in West Virginia hundreds of years from now talking about you. This is your chance. Nobody volunteers. They've got all these seasoned veteran warriors, and nobody's volunteered. David goes to Saul and he says, I'll do this. The least likely candidate who would say, what have I got to offer in the way of becoming a hero? You've got an attitude of heart, David. You're willing to give your life for something greater than you. Did you hear what David said? He said, who is this uncircumcised Philistine mocking the armies of the living God? There's something going on here bigger than me, bigger than my family, even bigger than our nation of Israel. This involves God. Here am I, send me, I'll do it. I want to show you just one verse today of one character that some of you have heard about. I've mentioned him preaching several times through the years. And unless you've heard me talk about him, unless you're an avid reader of Judges, because Judges is a book of misfits and heroes. People who couldn't get anything right until they were willing to give their life for something greater than themselves. And at that point, they became icons of their culture. But prior to that, they were people who really couldn't get their act together. And the only thing that changed was they became a person willing to give their life for something greater than themselves. There's only 2 verses in Judges about this man, and they're not even back to back. They're found in completely different chapters. Here's the verse I want to show you. After Ehud came Shamgar, son of Anath, who struck down 600 Philistines with an ox goad. He too saved Israel. Israel, a nation, something bigger than himself. The only other thing we know about Shamgar is later on, as Judges is talking about Deborah. Deborah's singing a song, and Deborah includes Shamgar in her song. And she just simply says, yeah, in the days of Shamgar, the main roadways were clogged with Philistines, and we couldn't travel the main routes anymore. And suddenly we can take 2 verses and we put them together, and it becomes very easy to figure out what's going on in this story. The Philistines have come in again. They've invaded Israel and her territories. They're holding her captive. They're running her properties for her. They're not out killing everybody. They're just controlling the land. And they're controlling the land by controlling the major highways. Shamgar, part of a people who were renowned to be farmers. And it appears that life became, according to Deborah, very much of a struggle because the Philistines had clogged up the main arteries of travel. And apparently what had been going on was the Philistines were setting up roadblocks on the main highways and probably charging taxes that Israel did not have. And so Deborah says that the people took to the winding paths in the hills because they couldn't travel the main routes. And so we can imagine someone like Shamgar, more than likely a farmer, and he gets out of bed. It's time to go to the fields, hook up his ox, get his plow ready to go, and go to the fields and plow, because this is how he makes a living. But life has become very hard because, going down Main Street to get from his house to the field he needs to plow is probably a 15-minute journey. But taking to the winding hill paths, maybe it takes 2 or 3 hours. And by the time he gets there and gets his team hitched up and starts plowing, it's time to quit and go home. Life has become very frustrating for Shamgar and all of those in his vicinity. This went on, it appears, for at least 2 or 3 years. And finally, for some reason, Shamgar gets out of bed one day and he's sick of it. There is a need, and everybody has seen the need. That's probably all they sit around the campfires and talk about, is the need, the problem. Nobody's volunteering to be the solution. Shamgar probably sat there in many conversations, probably saying somebody needs to do something about this. God needs to raise somebody up to deliver us. Who will be our salvation? And they talked about guys like Ehud, the guy who invented the short sword, the Benjamite warrior, could use his left hand and nobody expected it. And he went into King Eglon, and the king of Moab, and his name was Eglon, and he went into his chambers and with a so-called tribute to bring to the king, and he told everybody to leave because he had a secret to tell the king, and the king says, everybody out. And when everybody went out, then Ehud pulled that short sword that was not found when they frisked him, because if you're right-handed, the sword should be on the left side, and they frisked his left side. There was no sword there, so they let him in to see the king, not knowing he had a short sword under his skirt on his right hip. He went and he plunged that short sword into the incredibly deep fat of this king, if you know the story. And he became a hero. And Shamgar is probably sitting around, we need someone like Ehud. We need a hero like Ehud, man, to come and save us again. And years go by, and it's like, we need someone to do something about this. You ever hear anything like this in America?